Hey everyone. This presentation will cover the topic of use of force in law enforcement in connection with Chapter 8 of the textbook. So we talk about use of force because it is an integral part of a police officer's job to use force, and that constant potential need for using physical force, including deadly force, is very important to understanding police culture, police behavior, and the relationship between the public and the police. Because we had granted police a particular legal authority to use force in a proactive manner, which is generally not afforded to private citizens, at least not to the same degree. And as Rubenstein put it, the use of force, it's not a question of would or whether, but when and how much. In other words, it's understood that the police at some point in their career are going to have to use some sort of physical force. The issue is, when is it going to be used and how much will the officer need to use in a given situation? In a police officer's work, physical force is considered legitimate in three specific circumstances. And this will become more important as we talk about misconduct and the misapplication of force. But the first circumstance is one that, frankly, all of us possess, and that is the right to use self-defense to prevent injury or death to us from another person. And depending on the state, the law regulates or may regulate self-defense of private citizens a little bit more stringently than it does the police. So, but suffice it to say, this is one aspect of using force that is more common between individuals and the police that you're probably kind of familiar with. The police can also use physical force to defend other people. That includes fellow officers and private citizens. Again, private citizens also have some legal justification or legal authority to use physical force to defend other people. But again, it's probably going to be restricted to a greater extent for private citizens than it would be for the police. This third one is the most significant difference, and that's going to be to make an arrest. We grant the police a special authority to proactively use physical force to restrict people's freedoms and in some cases take their lives in fulfillment of their law enforcement function. And so as a result of this extra authority that they possess, it's important for the police to have clear understandings of when force is appropriate, what level of force is appropriate. And frankly, getting back to the question or the statement on the first slide, when can they use it and how much is appropriate? So, and that's kind of where we're going with this. But to put this into a more concrete context, I wanted to start off showing this video. And this is a body cam footage of an officer who was dispatched to a home in response to a call of an unknown man trying to get into a woman's residence. And you'll see what happens when he gets there. There is application of physical force here in varying degrees, so just be aware of that. And we will talk through this a little bit after the video is over.
I'm gonna be sorry here soon.
You're gonna be sorry?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Well, what are you getting on me for?
Okay, so
This bitch just fucking killed my kid. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so who are you?
I'm Jeremy.
Jeremy?
Yes.
David 6, I'm in contact with the mail party. Okay, so why are you going into the house?
Because I was looking for my daughter.
Go ahead and turn around for me.
No.
Turn around.
No. I'm gonna get fucking charged for I'm a fucking son of a bitch! Get the fuck out of here! Hey, what? No!
We're fighting!
Hey, it's okay, bud. Hey. No, it's not.
Oh, yeah.
Back up!
Taser deployed.
You're good, bro. You're good. Hey, take it easy, bro. Back up. No, you're good, you're good. I'm gonna light this motherfucker up.
Run code.
You're getting in trouble, bro. Hey, if you want to... Hey, you're getting in trouble, bro. Bro, you fucking... Get away from me!
Get back up.
This guy's just fucking... It's okay, bro. Here. I'm here to help.
Move. Get back! Get on the ground now!
Hey, dude, he'll shoot you.
Get on the ground!
Yeah.
Get on the ground!
Get on the ground, bro. It's okay.
Get on the ground! Get back!
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Get back! Get on the ground! Jeremy, get on the ground! Jeremy, get on the ground!
Fuck you.
Get on the ground! Now!
Jeremy, bro. Hey.
Get on the ground!
Dude, he'll shoot you.
Get on the ground!
He'll shoot you.
Get on the ground! Now! Now! Get on the fucking ground!
Jeremy.
Get back!
Yes, sir. Jeremy, get on the ground, bro.
Get back!
Jeremy.
Get on the ground!
Just listen to him, bro. Okay, I will. Yeah.
Get on the ground!
Get on your knees and just get
One at gunpoint!
Yeah, get down, bro.
Get down on the ground!
Motherfucker! You hit my ribs! I can't breathe.
Get on the ground!
No, motherfucker.
Get on the ground!
Get off me, you son of a bitch! I'll light your fucking pig ass up! Fuck you! Fucking pig! You get on the ground! You fucking pig!
Get on the ground!
You shot me, stupid.
Send an ambulance!
Motherfucker! You're a piece of shit. You know what? You're a fucking piece of shit. I just lost my daughter.
Hey, I...
Get out! Fuck you, dude. You're not gonna fucking wrestle me around like that.
Stop squirming. Stop squirming.
Let it bleed out. Let it bleed out. Fuck it. Yeah, fucking bleed out.
Give me this. You have to put your handcuffs. Relax.
You fucking pigs.
It's alright. You're good, Mark. It's alright. You're good, Mark. It's alright, Mark. You okay?
No.
Are you hurt?
No, okay. 5 months.
Walk over there.
You good? No, I'm not.
Okay, so let's talk through this video a little bit. So some questions to think about, which you're probably already doing. Was the officer's use of force justified in this particular incident? And was the officer's use of force appropriate for the situation? And then were there any alternative options for the officer? Oh, sorry, I have a typo there. That the officer had available that would have prevented this use of force. All right, those are kind of the key questions of the when and how much, okay? And so how do we answer these questions when thinking through these kinds of incidents? Because this is kind of a point of contention between police and the public on in a lot of cases, um, because each side is going to have a different perspective on what was appropriate and what was not. And so that's part of the reason I want to talk through this. But if you want to pause this, take a second to kind of think through this and see what you think before we get into breaking this down a bit. So in policing, part of the question that helps officers decide when and how much force is appropriate is a concept called the use of force continuum. And what I'm going to give you here is a general set of guidelines that are pretty consistent across policing, even if individual departments present this in a different format. The concepts tend to be fairly similar in how this works out. So this is not pulled from any specific police department. It's most definitely based on the police training and academy training that I had, and other common training curricula that police departments use. So, but don't think I didn't take this from any specific police department. So what this continuum does is it contrasts the level of resistance a suspect is presenting to an officer, and then contrasts that with the appropriate level of response that an officer has. And so the lowest level of resistance that a suspect will have is just their physical presence. And in response to that, we have an officer who is present. So in other words, it's assumed that in this case, you will have an individual suspect who has caught the attention of police for some reason, whether it's a call for service like the video, or the police see a suspicious person on the street and want to interact with them. And so the assumption is that as soon as the officer appears on the scene, that their physical presence inherently causes the suspect to act in a certain way. And at this point, there is no physical force being applied or any verbal force. It's just literally the officer shows up, and ideally in that circumstance, the suspect will become compliant and do whatever it is that the officer is needing to do to accomplish the task at hand. The next level up is called verbal non-compliance. This would be when a suspect becomes verbally argumentative or insulting, things like that. In contrast to that, you have the officer's verbal commands. So the officer can tell them to stop what they're doing, or to sit down, or stop doing whatever it is that they're doing. The next level up on the suspect side is passive resistance. And this is going to be like running away, or if you've seen like protests where the protesters just go limp and the police have to carry them out, that's a form of passive resistance. They're not being compliant. They're doing something physical to be non-compliant, but they're not being actively violent towards the police. In contrast to this, the officer can now use soft, empty hand control, which is the application of their hands on people's bodies to pick them up, pull them around. You could use pressure point application, or joint manipulation, things like that. Then you have active resistance on the part of the suspect, which is the next level. That is when the suspect is becoming pulling away, more physically involved in this. In some contexts, I think you could probably argue that running away maybe is more active resistant than passive, but the most common form of active resistance would be when an officer's trying to apply soft, empty hand control to put handcuffs on or whatever, and the person starts pulling their hands away, struggling a little bit. But again, not trying to be actively violent towards the officer to cause injury. The contrasting level on the officer side would be hard, empty hand, which includes punches with fists, closed fists, open hand strikes, kicks, knee strikes, things like that. Then we move up to the side of active aggression for a suspect. This is when the suspect is actively trying to cause injury to the police officer. And the comparable side, level of force on the officer side is intermediate weapons, which are going to be traditionally it's things like the baton or impact weapons. Some departments will include the taser. They will include chemical sprays or like pepper sprays, things like that. Usually those fall in around the hard, empty hand to intermediate weapons level. And then on the top level of force for the suspect is going to be deadly force, which is any sort of force being used against the officer or another person that could reasonably lead to the likelihood of death or serious bodily injury. And when we say serious bodily injury, that generally means some grievous injury that can cause lifelong complications. So serious disfigurement or serious traumatic brain injury, things like that. And on the other side of this, you have the officer's response. And so within this, the way this continuum works is that the officer has what's called the +1 rule. And what this says is that whatever level of resistance a suspect is presenting to the officer, they can go the equivalent level over and up one step. So for instance, let's talk about the video. The officer shows up, so you have a suspect standing there who is present, then you have an officer who is present. And immediately, the suspect stopped and talked to the officer, right? The officer then, through this conversation, chose to move to verbal commands, telling the suspect, or Jeremy is his name, to stand there and turn around, put his hands behind his back. In response to that, the suspect became verbally non-compliant and passively resistant, trying to pull, or even, I think you could make the argument, even actively resistant, and became, very clearly wasn't going to comply, took several steps back. The officer then gave more verbal commands, and in response to that, the suspect became actively aggressive. So now you're up at the next to the top level on the suspect side. So at this point, the officer has to make a decision what level of force is appropriate, or what can they use and what would be appropriate. So now you'll switch back over to the right side, and you'll see that the equivalent level of response here is for intermediate weapons, which would be a baton, which would be any kind of impact weapon they might have on them, a taser, pepper spray, things like that, which is what the officer did respond with. It wasn't effective, and the suspect then de-escalated a bit back to being passive to actively resistant and verbally non-compliant. Once the suspect did that, the officer then can de-escalate as they see fit, which would, if let's say the suspect is now being passively or actively resistant, then this officer can then move across the continuum here. The officer could use hard empty hand control or intermediate weapons with the +1 rule. If you saw in the video, or if you were thinking back to it, what level of force did the officer choose to deploy at that point? The officer's taser wasn't effective. The verbal commands weren't effective. He didn't use pepper spray. He jumped up to deadly force by pulling his service weapon and pointing it at him, pointing it at the suspect. Now, the problem here is that deadly force is only authorized to meet deadly force. The +1 rule does not apply with deadly force. And so you have a suspect now who is actively resistant at best, definitely verbally non-compliant, and the officer has now jumped up 2 steps to deadly force when there was no deadly force threat present. All right, hopefully that makes sense. And so at that point, the suspect became verbally non-compliant. He wasn't running, he wasn't cooperating, he was just standing there, not listening to commands. At another point, the suspect became actively resistant by fleeing, and at that point, the officer fired a single gunshot using deadly force level force to shoot the suspect, who then became compliant, relatively compliant, was put in handcuffs, right? So putting all that in context, think about the questions again. Was this a justifiable use of force, in this case, deadly force? And so the use of force continuum is helpful, but it doesn't answer the question, doesn't provide enough information to fully answer the questions effectively. And so what a lot of law enforcement agencies have moved to is kind of an expanded take on this that looks at the totality of the circumstances. And I forget, this was not my graphic. I forgot where I found this, but it covers what we need to do here. So the officer's response should be kind of framed by these questions. Can I physically control the suspect? Can I physically do it with my hands? Could I use a non-lethal weapon not meant to cause death or great bodily harm? And is deadly force the appropriate option to prevent death or great bodily harm to myself or others? That's the key to using deadly force. And to answer those questions, you look at these 4 sets of factors. The subject factors. What subject factors are influencing this situation? What is it about the individual who is, that is relevant to this encounter? So what is their physical size? What's their demeanor? Do they have any weapons, or is there has there been a report of a weapon? Are they showing a weapon? What other things are going on with this subject? Are they intoxicated? Do they have mental illness? Obvious signs of mental illness or psychosis, or whatever, right? Then you contrast that to the individual officer factors, and this is a point of honest self-reflection. It should be. What is the officer's physical size in comparison to the subject? Are they are similar stature and physical fitness level? Are they larger and stronger? Are they smaller and less physically fit? What level of training do they have, and how comfortable or confident do they feel in their training? What's their level of experience in dealing with these types of situations and these types of people? Are there other factors in play that the officer, their mental state, are they well rested or whatever? Then you have environmental factors, which is the lower left here. What are the environmental factors that may be relevant here? So are there other people in the area? And what are they doing? Are they escalating the situation? Do they pose an additional threat? Are they impeding the process in some way? Whatever. What's the weather like, and why does weather matter? Well, this could be an issue of visibility, or that's probably the most common one would be visibility. I think you could make an argument that wet ground may make it harder to maintain traction if you're running or fighting or whatever. What's the location? Is this an empty parking lot? Are you on the side of a highway with a lot of cars going by where you or the subject could get into traffic and get run over? Are there a lot of bystanders nearby? Is this a congested residential area? Whatever else is going on that might be relevant. And then just other factors. Is the subject resisting, and to what level? Are the subject's actions not likely to cause death or great bodily harm? And this is an important distinction because it's very easy for people, particularly in law enforcement, to kind of ease their way towards this. Well, I don't know. They might have a weapon and I just don't know it. They might kill somebody and I just don't know it. That could always happen. And so, yeah, it could, but that doesn't mean that it's justifiable. How likely is it that that's really what's going on? How likely is it that this person has a weapon and is getting ready to kill me or somebody else? And do I have legitimate, articulatable evidence to justify my belief that that person is someone who poses a likely cause of death or great bodily harm? And then, are the subject's actions likely to actually cause death or great bodily harm? So a person may say, I'm going to effing kill you, but they don't have a gun, they don't have a knife, they don't have a baseball bat. Well, how likely is it that they're going to be able to kill you? Or are they just trying to be threatening? Or is it pretty obvious that this person is being actively aggressive, they have a weapon, you're not sure if you're going to be able to control them in any other way, and if you don't get this situation under control immediately, you or somebody else is likely to lose your life. All right, so all of this is going on, and this is just the decision-making process that most people would have anyway. So now, with all this in mind, let me go back into this, and I'll talk through it a little bit. Because one of the key points that I touched on earlier, and I want to reemphasize, is that one of the problems that researchers recognize with law enforcement use of force is that there is often a tendency for officers to put themselves in situations where the use of force is far more likely to be necessary because of poor tactics and poor decision making along the way. And I personally feel like this is a good example of that. So again, we have the suspect standing in the street. The officer gets there, pulls up, gets out, and we have our first moment here that I'm going to bring this up. So in this situation, what has the officer done? Well, they've gotten a call of a suspect trying to break into a home, which on its face would be an active burglary in progress kind of situation. And generally speaking, officers are trained not to do what this officer did right here, which is pull right up on a suspect, open the door, and step out right in front of them, because now immediately the officer has placed themselves in extreme close proximity to a suspect who you don't know at this immediate moment what their demeanor is. Are they armed? Are they violent? What's going on? But you've just jumped out of your car right in front of them, right in their face, which is not smart decision making. Ideally, the officer would want to put their vehicle in between themselves and the suspect, create some space, put a barrier between you, so you've got some room to maneuver and react if something goes down.
I'm gonna be sorry here soon.
You're gonna be sorry?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Well, what are you getting on me for?
Okay, so...
This bitch just fucking killed my kid.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so who are you?
I'm Jeremy.
Jeremy?
Yes.
David 6, I'm in contact with the male party. Okay, so why are you going into the house?
Because I was looking for my daughter.
Go ahead and turn around.
Okay, so at this point, what is the suspect's demeanor to you? What is their body language telling you? What is their voice inflection telling you? Based on what you see here. For me, I see an individual who looks to be agitated, who is being compliant at this point, but appears to be agitated, which, who knows why. If this guy legitimately believes that the person in this house killed his daughter, it would make sense why somebody would be agitated, right? But at this point, you have a suspect who is leaning against the car with their arms crossed and being compliant, right? What are the officer's options at this point? Think about that for a second. If you were the officer here, what would you do? Or what do you think you could do in this situation? This officer chose to
No.
Turn around.
No. If I'm going to
place the
get fucking
person in
charged.
handcuffs. Now, immediately the suspect became actively resistant and then actively aggressive within about a second or 2 seconds. Now you have the suspect coming at the officer with their fist doubled up or balled up, ready to fight. The officer now is in kind of a precarious situation because they're really close and don't have a lot of time to react. Officer draws their taser, which would be an appropriate use of force for active aggression.
Fuck out of here.
Unfortunately for the officer, the taser didn't work. There are reasons why this could be the case. Maybe one of the darts didn't deploy properly. It's probably the most common. And so now the officer has lost one of their key tools that they can use to prevent the use of force or other types of use of force. But now you see in the scene here, approaching from the left is a bystander who has stopped. I don't know if the bystander knows this individual or is just trying to be a good Samaritan. But now we have an additional person on the scene that the officer has to deal with.
No. We're fighting.
Hey, it's okay, bud. Hey. No, it's not. Oh, yeah.
Back up.
The bystander is trying to de-escalate the situation.
Back up. No, you're good. I'm gonna light this motherfucker up.
Run code.
You're getting in trouble, bro.
The officer is now called for backup, tries to deploy the taser again and fails.
Get back up.
This guy's just fucked up.
At this point, you have a highly agitated individual, suspect, who hasn't shown any sense of having a weapon, and as far as I'm aware, there was no report of a weapon involved with the suspect. You have a bystander who is trying to de-escalate the situation. The suspect is standing several feet away and is not being actively aggressive at this point. And frankly, the bystanders' de-escalation efforts seem to be working for now. The officer has already called for backup, asked them to run code, which means lights and sirens to get here as quickly as you can. And now there's a decision point to be made. What do you do? What would you do? You've got backup coming. You've got a bystander there to help if you need it, who's trying to de-escalate, and you have a suspect who's not armed and has been aggressive but is not currently being aggressive. What do you do? What level of resistance is the suspect presenting? At this point, it would be passively resistant and verbally non-compliant.
It's okay, bro. Here. I'm here to help.
Move. Get back.
The officer
Get
now
on the
chooses to
ground
go to
now.
deadly force
He'll shoot you.
Get on the ground.
and is giving
Get
verbal
on the
commands.
ground.
Get on the ground, bro.
Suspect
Get on the
showing
ground.
his
Get
hands. He
back.
doesn't have any weapons.
Yes, sir.
Get back. Get on the ground. Jeremy, get on the ground. Jeremy, get on the ground.
Suspect's clearly,
Get
to me
on the
anyway, trying to
ground.
figure out
Now.
what he's going to do at this point.
Get on the ground.
He'll shoot you.
Get on the ground.
He'll shoot you.
Get on the ground. Now.
His verbal commands are
Now.
not working.
Get on the fucking ground. Get back.
But at this point, what do we have? looking at the use of force continuum, you have a verbally non-compliant suspect who apparently does not have a weapon, does not apparently have any access to a weapon, and is being completely verbally non-compliant, and the officer is now displaying a threat of deadly force, which is far and above what the use of force continuum would argue is appropriate. The officer again has backup on the way. What are your options here? If it's you, what do you do? Well, in this case,
Jeremy, get on the ground, bro.
Get back!
the officer continues
Get
to
on the ground!
point the weapon.
Just listen to him, bro. Okay, I will. Yeah.
Get on the ground!
Get into these and just get
Point at gunpoint!
Yeah, get down, bro.
Get down on the ground!
The unarmed suspect runs.
Fucker.
The officer fires a single shot.
I can't breathe.
Get on the ground!
Nah, motherfucker.
Get on the ground!
The suspect becomes actively
I'll light your
resistant
fucking pig ass up. Fuck you.
and verbally non-compliant.
You get on the ground. Suck my dick, you fucking pig.
Get on the ground!
You shot me.
Send an ambulance!
Motherfucker. You're a piece of shit. You know what? You're a fucking piece of shit. I just lost my daughter.
Hey, I...
Get
out!
Fuck you, dude. You're not gonna fucking wrestle me around like that.
Stop squirming. Stop squirming.
And then now at this point, the backup officer has arrived and is now trying to let them go approximately 30 seconds after the gunshot. So now my question for you is, do you think that this use of deadly force was justified under these circumstances? Yes or no, and why? And that's a question that you need to answer based on all of this information here. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand how the use of force continuum works and how officers think through these kinds of things. So when we're looking at the misuse of force and the misapplication of force, it generally falls into three categories. And I don't think this is in your textbook, but here it is. So you have the accidental use of force, you'll have excessive use of force, and then you can have brutality. And the three are very distinctly different things with different problems or different contributing factors. So accidental force is what it sounds like. The officer unintentionally uses force against another person without real meaning to, without intending to. Probably the most common example I can think of on accidental use of force is when an officer accidentally shoots somebody or negligently shoots somebody, to be honest with you. But it's an accidental shooting in that the officer didn't really plan or intend to shoot someone. And I've seen this happen two ways. One is that the officer intends to go for their taser and without thinking goes for their firearm instead. And then when they go to deploy the taser, they pull the trigger and actually shoot the suspect. Totally unintentional, an accidental, negligent shooting. The other one is basically due to mishandling of their or unsafe handling of their firearm. An officer will draw their weapon and point it at a suspect, and they won't keep their booger hook off the bang switch, and they fire off a shot accidentally and hit the suspect. I've seen those happen, videos of it happen several times. So those would be accidental examples. I would assume there are cases when, the officer accidentally deploys their pepper spray or something or whatever, but the gun thing is the biggest one. Then you have excessive use of force. These would be cases where the officer genuinely believes that their use of force that they chose is appropriate and necessary when in reality it wasn't. That there were far more appropriate or justifiable options than what they used. So an example might be, let's say you have an older suspect who's maybe an elderly person who's small and frail, and they're not being compliant, and the officer grabs them and throws them on the ground and puts handcuffs on them or whatever. Where normally if it was a young, fit individual, that might be appropriate, but for an older, frail individual, it's totally excessive under the circumstances. And then the third one is brutality, and these are the ones that tend to make the news most commonly. These are the cases where it's just blatantly obvious that the officers went far and above what was justified and necessary, and oftentimes it's done for the purpose, what they call street justice. That if the police, there was an old saying that if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass kicking with them, kind of idea. So those are the cases that are more, more publicly noted. I guess, and it's probably both. So you have, or I guess all three of them. Anytime the police going above and beyond, it's a problem and people notice it. Brutality is the most egregious, and it's also the easiest to deal with. Excessive use of force is not so much, or not as easy to deal with, because that gets more into decision making, which is harder to control, whereas malicious behavior is easy to root out and get rid of. So how do we do that? So law enforcement agencies regulate the use of force in a wide variety of ways. One of them is, actually I probably should move the bullet point further up to the top, is with training. Officers are trained extensively in the police academy and in the departments themselves on an ongoing basis on what types of force are appropriate, when they should be used, what's the use of force continuum, how do you make the decisions on what are the level of appropriate use of force, so on and so forth. When force is used, agencies generally require use of force reports. It's a separate document that documents all of the circumstances specifically related to the use of force, so that the officer has to talk through their decision-making process. What did they see? What were their interpretations? What levels of force did they use, and why did they choose those options over others? Now, fun fact, the use of force reports are generally kept separate from the case file. So if you ever find yourself needing access to a use of force report, you're going to have to go ask for it specifically. You can't say, hey, yeah, the cops beat up my brother and I need a copy of the police report. The use of force report's not going to be part of it. You have to ask for that separately. But those use of force reports are used to document the application of force. What are the trends in the agency? Can we use that information to change training or policy or whatever? Officers now also have body-worn cameras, which wasn't a thing when I was in policing, and it provides the officer's point of view, so you can see what the officer sees from the angle that they saw it, or as close as you can get. And you have the vehicle cameras, which have been around much longer. Again, having this camera footage is helpful for people after the fact to see what was going on, what were the circumstances, was it blatantly obvious that the officer was using excessive force, were they engaged in brutality or misconduct, things like that. And then all of that information, again, is used for internal reviews of use of force incidents. Again, to see trends, to see if there are changes that need to be made to internal policies, the training processes, to see if maybe we need to change what types of weapons we're deploying or how we're using them. And also, these contribute to what are called early intervention systems. And this is where departments can use this information to proactively identify individual officers or units or squads or whatever who may have an unusually high level of use of force incidents compared to everybody else. So if you have officers who have just far and above more use of force incidents than you would expect an officer to have, or the types of force that they're using is consistently higher than what you would normally expect an officer to use, that should be an opportunity for the agency to take a look at that person or that group and see if we need to retrain, if we need to get rid of somebody, take action ahead of time before it gets out of hand. And then this last one are clear use of force policies. Departments go through quite a bit of effort, generally speaking, to have clear use of force policies that clearly outline what levels of force are appropriate. They'll talk about the use of force continuum in whatever form that they choose to use. It dictates when deadly force is authorized. It dictates what sort of reports need to be made, when are use of force reports required, what are the expected and required medical interventions after the fact that officers must provide, things like that. And so all of those put together are various ways that agencies regulate the use of force. And then outside of the agencies, you have, potentially criminal charges or civil charges or civil cases that can be brought against officers and departments for misuse of force. You have, of course, media coverage, and now you have private citizens with video cameras, cell phone cameras, and things like that. In fact, one of the earliest use of force police brutality cases, that one of the most famous in American history, was the Rodney King beating that happened back in the 90s. So, and that was caught on a private person's video camera back when most people didn't have video cameras. I'm that old. But anyway, So to wrap this up, officers are restricted in the amount of force that they can use by law, and it's reflected in the use of force continuum. And officers are expected to only use the minimum amount of force necessary to carry out their duties. And that is a carryback to Sir Robert Peel from the previous chapter. Officers may use excessive force due to the ambiguity of use of force policies, agency subcultures, things that encourage the use of force or going overboard. And use of force is monitored and regulated through various means, but they're only as effective as the agencies using those options. So you may have a department that trains on use of force and requires, use of force reporting and all that stuff. But if they don't really pay any attention to it or don't care, then it's only going to be as effective as whomever's using it, right? So anyway, I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions about use of force, feel free to let me know.